On today's World Insight, China's reform and opening up 45 years on. Through the breakthroughs and milestones, how well has the strategic policy weathered global challenges and seized opportunities? What does the pursuit of high-standard opening up and reform mean for China's future? Joining us in today's panel are four guests.
In 1978, the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping initiated China's reform and opening up policy. 45 years later, China has transformed from a poor agrarian country into a modern global power with a pivotal role in global economic growth. China's GDP in the year 2022 was about 18 trillion US dollars, the world's second largest, which accounts for about 18.6% of the world GDP, compared with a little less than 150 billion US dollars in the year 1978. Despite the world's various setbacks, China has kept a high level of opening up policy to the outside world and work with other countries on global peace and security. So what do we make of China's potential in reform and opening up? How can the country contribute more to the world? For answers, let's loop in our panelists. For the discussion on China's reform and opening up, we have Manny Menendez III, founder and CEO of MCM Group Holding. In Kuala Lumpur, Peter Chen, Deputy Director with the Institute of China Studies with the University of Malaya. And in Shanghai, Joseph Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics with East China Normal University. He is originally from the US. And in Beijing, Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Past the 45 years, reform and opening up in China has been having tremendous impact on everyone here in this country and certainly almost everyone around the world. Now, Manny, you earlier in the very early stage of China reform and opening up, you were participating in working with CITIC, which is one of the Chinese business entities dealing with the rest of the world at the very early stage of reform and opening up. Tell me more about that. What was it like to participate in that process?
What I've seen in China has not been good. It's not been great. It's been a miracle. To see the growth in China and the growth from 53 cents a day back in 1979 to $12,000, $13,000 per capita per year is absolutely a miracle. And so when in CITIC, when I started, we did the first U.S.-China equity joint venture. We built the factory. CITIC was one of the partners in it, and the Guangdong government, and a Chicago company called Beatrice, and we put together a food factory in Canton, now Guangzhou. And that was the first, accredited by the Wall Street Journal as the first equity joint venture with a major Fortune 100 company. So I think that was using the idea of the open door policy of market economy with socialism and Chinese characteristics and making things happen. And I think Tianwei, the key is not only the policy, which Deng Xiaoping, I think, really did an incredible job at making that happen. But also, I want to give full credit to the hard work and determination of the Chinese people who I've worked with all these years, who have done a fabulous job at making policy into the reality of the China today.
Mr. Chang, where you are in Malaysia, how do you understand from your personal experiences China's reform and opening up past 45 years?
China has successfully alleviated poverty it cannot be said even more than how remarkable this accomplishment is. I'm a philosopher, I'm a historian, and I see this transformation of China within one generation from a poverty-stricken country into one that is increasingly wealthy and prosperous is unmatched in human history. And for us in Southeast Asia and in Malaysia, we ourselves has been struggling to overcome our sort of stagnant economic and poverty-stricken sort of state. And to see China do that, we felt that there is something that, perhaps an inspiration for us as well. And China's economic miracle need not be contained within China alone. And through the BRI, and China is helping us in Southeast Asia and in the global South to have our own version of our own Malaysian dream or Southeast Asian dream.
Mr. Gregory Mahoney, Professor, tell me more. What is your takeaway of past the 45 years?
Well, the first 20 years of national development in China from liberation, it experienced a lot of ups and downs, but the one thing it accomplished was it consolidated the political system and achieved basic self-sufficiency in terms of food production, national defense. On the other hand, it was also clear that many Chinese were ready for new approaches, especially from the mid-1970s. And these intersected positively with the changes that followed. But as we also know, as has already been noted, there were many uncertainties and concerns from the start, giving rise to Deng Xiaoping repeating the idiom that it would be necessary to cross the river by feeling the stones.
Professor Liu, you are the only Chinese citizen among the panelists. I'm sure you feel it from very different perspectives. Tell me more about, personally, what is the biggest takeaway for you, both as an individual and also as a professor of trade?
Well, first, as the professor of trade, I would observe the China's success is due to the synchronization of domestic reform versus the open door policy. It's really a two-wheel drive where we prepare the domestic market by deregulation and also by encouraging the private sector to fully participate in the Chinese economic construction, and by also getting onto the track of international norms. We are able to learn quite a lot to streamline some of the laws and decrees that China had, and therefore we virtually form a virtuous feedback cycle where they are mutually assisting each other so that we are able to move step by step on a gradual but solid basis to climb the ladder onto a high-level development stage. And as a citizen, I do feel that we are the beneficiary of these reform, and also we are the contributors for such reform, and therefore we need to further to step up the momentum for China to move on again.
The relationship between opening up and reform. Now, what is the logic between these two? How are they have been working together for the achievements that all of you have mentioned in the first round of a discussion? I'm really curious about this.
In the early days of reform, there was it's kind of hard to express it, but there were things that were being done that were not really allowed to be done. For example, the model villages under the Mao period were very much at odds with the model villages that Deng Xiaoping started promoting, and those model villages that were using more market solutions would have been castigated during the Mao years. I think this also, you can point to the construction of the special economic zones, where they created these special places where you could try out new policies and do things that were not allowed in other parts of China, almost like capital quarantine zones, in which the policies could be experimented with. They could learn how to deal with and manage these capital controls, learn how to see, or at least figure out how they might impact society, and draw lessons from that they could then generalize for other parts of the country. So yeah, in these cases, you first have this opening up, but then you also have to start to reform your system to take advantage of these opening ups and to make sure that you're at the same time not being overrun or fundamentally having your color changed by these very powerful outside forces that were coming in, and frankly looking to take advantage of China as much as they could, which is part and parcel of what international capital wants to do. But of course, China wanting to retain the various gains that it had made during those first 20 to 30 years of its new China development.
I think the logic was show people a better life, show people that the path of open door policy is working, and then step by step make reforms as required. And I think Professor Mahoney made a good point. When I went to Shenzhen in the early days, 1979, 1980, it was a fishing village. And I was picking lychee. And I look at it today, which is a great example. 18 million people, the third wealthiest city in China. But I think that the point is, as China opened up and we tried different, whether it's joint ventures or wholly foreign-owned enterprises, and we were trying to build and prove that the open door policy could work, I think then there is reform in various areas of China to modify what was before to make it more current with the current situation. So I think it's a step-by-step approach.
Professor Liu?
By joining WTO, we streamlined the thousands of laws and decrees that are not really compatible with the global norm. And this is something that prepared China to be able to dialogue and play the same rulebook with the global partners. And so therefore, by opening to the outside world, we are able to see where are those differences and where are the deficiencies that we need really to make up. And in the meantime, with more deepened reform, more of those, the companies are given the right to do the international trade, to get engaged in joint ventures. And so more of those, the human capacity are also getting trained through interaction with the rest of the world. So that's really a virtuous cycle that we are able to benefit from.
Mr. Chang, do you see some of these points, or shall I say, the earlier playbook can still be relevant and be able to help and support China through this new round of deepening reform and opening up?
Well, before I go into the next phase, I just want to recount incident of Deng Xiaoping himself at the early parts of the reform visited Singapore and saw Singapore as a very good example. Besides learning from the West, perhaps from Singapore as well, how did Singapore manage to build its economy within 2 decades into where it was during the early 80s? So we in the Southeast Asia also felt the presence of China coming in, opening up and wanting to invite us to be part of the China economic. At that time, we didn't realize miracle. A lot of Southeast Asian entrepreneurs and capital begin to move into China and help in the development of China's sort of radical transformation. Now, 45 years later on, the flow of capital seems to be in the reverse direction. Now we are benefiting from China's continuing opening up, engaging with the rest of the world. And I think it is good that China should continue to maintain that open policy to emphasize free trade and continue to engage with Southeast Asia and the rest of the world.
many people have been trying to learn what the world is like, or what the world was like. But now, when you talk about the higher standards of reform and opening up here in China, it not only is a process of China looking at the world, but also it involves a lot about how the world is looking at China. How do you see the back and forth traffic of this question and the possibility of policies and synergies and also energy here in China for higher standards of reform opening up?
The world has changed. China has contributed a lot to the GDP growth of other countries through its own growth. And now being the second largest economy, I think it's around 21 trillion and US is 27 or 28 trillion. The two countries represent about 45 or 46% of the world's GDP. So we have this obligation to work together. And I think with the world, especially with the US, the only way to do that is constant dialogue, knowing where common ground is. And I think there's plenty of common ground. And even, someone said, well, everyone's leaving China. Well, a new statistic, 42,000 foreign companies this year has set up in China, 32% increase. And that shows you more confidence in the China market. But coming to the policies, I think the only way to make effective policies is to look at the world and work with countries and dialogue with countries on both sides so that there's a clear understanding of those common issues that we can cooperate on. And those issues that are sensitive, or sometimes we call them red line, know what that means in clarity, black and white. So it's granular and level so that there's no misunderstandings going forward. And unfortunately, today in the world, there is a lot of misinformation about China and misunderstandings. And the only way I believe it sounds like a simple solution, but it is, I think the only way is face-to-face meetings with leaders, having these discussions and rolling up your sleeves with high frequency.
China caught the train during the grand transition, almost like 40 years ago, both technologically speaking and also in terms of geopolitics. But now the world is experiencing another grand transition. Nobody knows for sure where the wind is blowing, how it will blow, and what might be the biggest stakeholders, as we are all trying to figure out what this grand change is about. So meanwhile, China has already become the second largest economy in terms of total volume in the world, not per capita. And at the same time, geopolitically speaking, China-US relations becoming more complicated. So, Joseph, this is certainly a combination of all new elements. So what does it take to have higher standards of reforming, opening up to be achieved? That's a mind-boggling yet exciting question. Joseph, your observation.
On the one hand, we can look, for example, at China's tremendous success in the EV industry. And one of the ways that this was accomplished was by opening up and forcing Chinese EV companies to be more competitive. Tesla was allowed to build a gigafactory in Shanghai. It's the most advanced Tesla factory in the world. But this has prompted Chinese automakers like NIO in Hefei, which claim that they have bested the gigafactory in terms of automation. And so this type of opening up is really part and parcel with high tech or high quality development. What we see is China understanding that reform and opening up was good for China, but it also needs to demonstrate the case for other countries, particularly countries in the global South that got mired in their own neo-colonial or post-colonial paradigms, and through mechanisms like the Belt Road Initiative, China has shown that these countries can grow with China through win-win development.
Peter, how do you see the legacy of reform and opening up for the past 45 years to unleash the tremendous amount of energy, enthusiasm, synergy among the Chinese people and also even among the partners that China work with?
I think one of the remarkable feature of China's success, a feature that is unique to China and yet unfamiliar to us and also a dilemma for us, is the role of the state. The state has been so instrumental in bringing China to where it is within the last 45 years. And for pretty much the rest of the world, the state has never played such a role. If there is a role for the state tends to be seen as a necessary evil. That is something that I think the rest of the world will, and also China will have to find a point of understanding and reconciliation as to where a proper understanding of the state of the role is. The state of the role has been crucial in bringing China to where it is. But for much of the rest of the world, we prefer to not to see such a strong role of the state in our respective place, in our respective country. We want to see the market-driven economy, a lesser role of the state. So that is where I think the challenge will be moving forward, whether China will be able to find a meeting point where we could see an understanding of where the role of the state and the public is. But no question, I think the unique feature of the Chinese story is how the state has come to play such a significant role. Perhaps for us, the rest of the world, we should rethink about how we view and understand the role of the state for ourselves. And maybe there is some lessons that we can learn from China. So that's how I see it.
Interesting. That is still in the thinking process, according to you, right, Peter?
Yeah.
Now, Manny, your thoughts on this?
Oh, I completely agree. I think that the state has, one of the important features of this opening period is not only economic development, but stability. Stability and predictability is very important in business. And China's been able to have stability through this whole 45 years. How it transitions and where those lines are of the state involvement or provincial governments or local governments involvement, I think this is a very complex issue because you're talking about structural reform versus policy reform. And structural reform takes much longer and much deeper thinking. And I think when you look at the success of the country to start making changes, China, like in the Professor Mahoney said before, the special economic zones, part of the theory back then was we try an area and experiment so that we can tweak whatever we need to tweak and not affect the whole country at the same time. So I think there has to be some reforms based on the current global reality, but structural reforms are done very carefully, very methodically, but I think they have to be done to reflect some of the comments of our distinguished panelists of today's China with respect to facing the world and how it makes contribution not only inside of China, but its external face, I think is very, very important now.
Bao Cheng, your thoughts on this same question?
In the first place, we still need a rule of law that's to be further strengthened. So right now, policy swings are still there to actually to damage the confidence of business people and even consumers and citizens alike. So people need better predictivity, what is really lying ahead. And second, the government is there to really redefine its role by providing more of the public goods and by setting up the enabling environment for business play, because after all, the nation's strategic advantage is really exemplified by the businesses they do, by the brands they represent, by the innovation they are able to create. So therefore, the government also needs to readjust its role. And third is that we still need to tackle with the hukou system where the mobility is still an obstruction for anyone, any Chinese citizen who are in Beijing, they should be able to buy the same type of cars, same type of houses, and also their kids are able to attend the same type of schools, receive the quality. I think more fundamentally is that we need more capacity building. So I think the government needs to spend more money on long-term investment into people. So right now, much of the focus is on mega projects, is on the amplification of those, the production capacity. But given that we are facing a new challenge of technological transformation, so people can really get the right expected return on a long-term basis.
Joseph, your thoughts before we go?
I agree with most of what Professor Liu said, but the one thing that I would add to it is, the future belongs to the young people. And we do have some significant generation gaps opening up, starting with the 90s generation in particular, and then accelerating on, where these were the first generations to really start to grow up in China's market or socialist market society. And one of the things that we see, of course, today is that a lot of young people, they don't want to be taking too much risk. They're not lazy, they work hard, but when we look at those first generations in the early part of the reform and opening up period, they were not afraid to take risks. They had little to lose. And today, young people feel that they have a lot to lose if they take risk. I think we need to, in order to really drive forward with innovation and development at this point and high quality growth, we need to encourage young people. We need to draw close to them, not coddle them, but let them know that we want them to take risk, to try new things, and to drive the country forward. All the young people that I work with in the university and beyond, they love their country. They want to see their country grow. They're not prone to having their color changed or being overly influenced by soft power from other countries. But nevertheless, I think they're still suspiciously viewed by some of the older generation for being, the strawberries or the egotist or whatever, the elegant egotist or whatever the terms have been that have proliferated in recent years. But I think draw close to them, support them, but also let them have a greater play and stay in the market and not just subjugated by the market. I think that would really be the place to look for sort of freeing up and encouraging a new round of growth and development, and one that frankly would be able to compete with anyone in the world, because young people today are very sophisticated in China.
Well, with that, we are wrapping up today's conversation. Thank you so much for your input. It's a gigantic subject. We try to handle at least some aspect of it within the past 30 minutes. Really appreciate it. Thanks. That's all the time we have for today. You can always check out our program on YouTube and follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us.